The air in the grand ballroom was worth more than a city block thick with perfume and power. Josie Turner stood 7 months pregnant as her husband's mistress, Zara Vance, whispered poison in her ear. "He's just waiting for you to drop the inconvenience so he can be with me," Zara hissed her red nails, gesturing towards Josie's belly. But Zara made one fatal mistake. She thought the fight was over the man. She had no idea Josie was about to drag her entire world into the light, and it wasn't the husband who would save the day. The penthouse on Park Avenue was less a home and more a museum of Damien Turner's success. It was all glass, steel, and cold imported Italian marble that seemed to leach the warmth from Josie's bare feet, even in August. At 7 months pregnant, Josie felt like a ghost haunting its own exquisite prison. The baby, a boy they had provisionally named Arthur, was a restless kicker, a constant living reminder of a bond that felt on her husband's side to be dissolving into icy obligation. Damien Turner was not a man. He was a corporation. Turner Industries, a monolith of logistics and tech, was his true wife. Josie Hayes, a former brilliant corporate lawyer from a family of good old money, rather than filthy New World riches, had been, she now understood, a strategic merger. He had needed her poise, her pedigree, and her intelligence to smooth the rough edges of his cutthroat reputation. And for a time it had worked. Their first 2 years were a whirlwind of genuine affection, or at least a very convincing simulation of it. He'd admired her mind, her ability to spar with him over contractual loopholes and market projections. Then he'd promoted her, as he'd joked, to CEO of the Turner legacy. The moment the pregnancy was confirmed, he'd pulled away. The late nights became all-nighters. The board dinners became urgent off-site crises. The scent that clung to his bespoke suits changed. Josie wore Jo Malone's peony and blush suede. The new scent was something sharper, more aggressive. Chanel No. 5, a classic but not hers. Tonight was the night that mattered most in their shared public life, the Turner Foundation Gala. It was the crowning event of New York's social calendar, a night where Damien laundered his ruthless corporate image through 9-figure charitable donations. It was to be held at the Orion Grand Ballroom, a space so opulent it made palaces look quaint. Josie was fastening the clasp of a diamond necklace, the Turner Star, a cold, heavy piece he'd gifted her, when Damien entered their dressing room. He was already in his tuxedo, a flawless, commanding presence. "Josie," he said, his voice the smooth, clipped baritone he used with his board. "You're not ready. We're due on the floor in 20. "I just needed a moment," she said, not turning from the mirror. He adjusted his bow tie, his eyes meeting hers in the reflection. "Are you feeling unwell again? Genevieve will be there. She'll be displeased if you look pale." His mother, Genevieve Turner, was the iron matriarch who still held a significant portion of the company's voting shares. She viewed Josie's pregnancy with a grim, dynastic satisfaction. "I'm fine, Damien. Just tired." He walked up behind her. His hands rested on her shoulders, but there was no warmth in them. It was a pose, something they'd done for Vogue. "Good. Tonight is important. The Kestrel acquisition is in its final stages. I need everyone to see solidarity. Stability." "The Kestrel acquisition," Josie repeated. That was Zara Vance's project. Zara. The name tasted like ash. Zara Vance was Damien's brilliant raven-haired vice president of acquisitions. She was a shark in couture, a woman who'd clawed her way up from nothing, and who Josie knew with chilling certainty was the source of the Chanel No. 5. For the past 3 months, Josie had not been idle. She had not been weeping into cashmere pillows. She had been the lawyer she was trained to be. It started with the scent. Then a single onyx cufflink she didn't recognize in his travel bag. Then the late-night calls he took on the terrace, his voice a low, intimate murmur she hadn't heard directed at her in a year. She had used her dormant credentials to access the family's private accounts. Not the ones Damien knew about, but the real trust accounts managed by her father's ancient, dusty firm, Hayes Legal. She hadn't been looking for infidelity. She'd been preparing for a divorce. She'd been trying to secure her child's future. She had hired a private investigator, a discreet man named Sullivan, who specialized in corporate malfeasance. The photos he'd provided were all the proof she needed Damien and Zara emerging from a private suite at the Carlisle. Damien and Zara sharing a brandy at a darkened bar. Zara's hand on his thumb stroking her knuckles. But then Josie had dug deeper. Driven by a cold, precise rage, she'd started looking into Zara's star project, the $800 million Kestrel acquisition. Zara had built her reputation on it. Damien praised her killer instinct. Josie, with her retired legal mind, found the first thread in less than an hour. A shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. A bank transfer that had been split into 3 separate smaller wire payments, all routed through a subsidiary in Singapore. All personally signed off by Zara Vance. It wasn't just an affair. It was a heist. Zara wasn't just sleeping with her husband. She was robbing him. And Damien, blinded by his own ego and her flattery, was letting her do it. Is something wrong, Josie? Damien asked, his reflection's eyes narrowing. Josie forced a smile. The pain in her heart was a physical, crushing weight, but she compartmentalized it. This was a case. She was preparing for trial. "No, darling," she said, turning to face him. She placed a hand on her stomach, a gesture of maternal fragility that was pure performance. "Just the baby. He's kicking. He must be excited for his first gala." Damien's face softened just a fraction. The legacy was his one true blind spot. "Right. Well, let's not keep our public waiting." He offered his arm. She took it, her fingers gripping the fine wool of his jacket. He felt the coldness of her diamond ring, but he didn't feel the ice in her veins. He thought she was a fragile, pregnant wife, slightly overwhelmed. He had no idea he was walking into an execution, and that she was the one holding the axe. The Orion Grand Ballroom was a sea of glittering sharks. Light from 3 dozen crystal chandeliers fractured across billions of dollars worth of diamond stocks and political influence. Every camera flash was a small explosion capturing the smiling, predatory faces of New York's elite. Senator Davenport was laughing with Julian Rothschild. A tech billionaire Josie despised was holding court by the champagne fountain. Damien and Josie Turner made their entrance. They were the main event. He was the king, and she his pregnant queen. The narrative was perfect. The murmurs were appreciative. "Mr. Turner! Mrs. Turner!" the paparazzi yelled from the velvet rope. Damien smiled a magnetic billion-dollar gesture. He placed a proprietary hand on the small of Josie's back, just above the swell of their child. "A wonderful evening," he projected. "We're so glad you could join us in supporting the Foundation's work." Josie smiled. She let her gaze sweep the room, serene and graceful. She was looking for one person. She found her near the main stage, holding a glass of champagne, surrounded by a coterie of fawning junior executives. Zara Vance. She was a vision in blood red, a custom Alexander McQueen dress that clung to her like a second skin. It was a defiant, flagrant statement. One did not wear red to a charity gala. It was seen as attention-seeking. But Zara didn't care. The dress was a challenge. It screamed, "Look at me. I am the one who matters." Her black hair was sleek, her makeup flawless. And as Damien guided Josie into the room, Zara's eyes met Josie's across the expanse of marble. There was no guilt in that gaze. There was no fear. There was only victory. A smug, predatory confidence that turned Josie's stomach to stone. "Damien, darling," a voice trilled. It was Genevieve Turner, his mother. She was a terrifying woman, sculpted by decades of social warfare, wearing a formidable sapphire necklace. "And Josie, you made it." "Of course, Genevieve," Josie said, her voice soft. "I wouldn't miss it." Genevieve grunted her eyes, scanning Josie's navy blue custom maternity gown. "Appropriate. You look... well." "Damien, I need a word," Genevieve said, already pulling him away. "The senator is waffling on that zoning ordinance." Damien gave Josie a perfunctory squeeze on the arm. "Go, mingle. I'll find you." And just like that, Josie was alone. Adrift in a room full of people who saw her as an accessory. She moved slowly, gracefully, accepting congratulations on the baby from people whose names she barely remembered. She was on autopilot, her mind a cold, whirring computer running calculations. She was halfway to the terrace, seeking a moment of quiet, when a voice stopped her. "Josie, you look absolutely glowing." Josie turned. Zara Vance stood before her, her smile as sharp as cut glass. The scent of Chanel No. 5 was overpowering. "Zara," Josie said, her voice perfectly level. "That's a very bold dress." "Thank you," Zara purred. "I believe in bold moves. They're the only ones that get results." She took a delicate sip of her champagne. "Damien loves it. He said it reminds him of a rare orchid he once saw in Singapore." It was a deliberate, targeted strike. Josie knew from Damien's credit card statements that their Singapore trip had been 2 months ago. "How lovely for you," Josie said, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. Zara's eyes followed the movement, and her smile widened, becoming something ugly. "You really are very pregnant, aren't you? It must be exhausting, carrying all that extra weight. It just drains the life right out of you." "It's a small price to pay," Josie said. "Is it?" Zara tilted her head. "I find pregnancy so biological, so primitive. I've always believed a woman's legacy should be what she builds," she said, gesturing to the ballroom, "not what she breeds." The insult was so profound, so venomous, that Josie felt the air leave her lungs. The people around them, sensing the subtle shift in energy, began to quiet down their conversations, fading as they subtly turned to watch. A confrontation between the wife and the work wife was the best kind of entertainment. "That's an interesting perspective." Josie managed her mind racing. "Not yet. Don't let her provoke you. Not here. Wait for the stage." "It's just the truth," Zara said, stepping a little closer. "Damien, he's a builder. He needs a partner who can build with him, not an incubator. You were a good lawyer, I heard. A killer. It's a shame you gave all that up to become this." She gestured to Josie from her swollen stomach to her tired eyes. "You should be careful, Zara." Josie said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You're speaking very freely. Why shouldn't I? Zara laughed, a low, throaty sound. Everyone knows. Everyone in this room knows that your marriage is a shell, a holding pattern. He's just waiting for you to serve your purpose. She leaned in her perfume, a suffocating cloud. He told me you know. He said he respects your lineage. But he desires me. My mind. My ambition. My everything else. Josie stood, frozen. She could feel the eyes on her. The pitying looks, the speculative whispers. This was what Zara wanted. To prove that she held all the power. To humiliate Josie on her own territory. He's a very vigorous man, Zara continued, her voice dripping with insinuation. He has needs that a delicate woman like you clearly can't meet right now, or perhaps ever again. Josie had to end this. She turned to walk away. Oh, Josie, Zara called out, her voice suddenly loud and clear, silencing the nearest 10 tables. I almost forgot. Congratulations. Josie stopped her back to the room. She turned slowly. Zara Vance raised her champagne glass in a mock toast, a cruel, triumphant smirk on her face. I do hope it's his. The Music Alive string quartet playing something by Vivaldi seemed to warp and fade. The chatter of the ballroom died. There was only the ringing in Josie's ears and the sight of Zara Vance standing there like a matador who had just delivered the killing blow. What did you say? Josie's voice was barely a breath. Zara's smirk didn't waver. She knew she had her audience. This was her stage now. She was no longer just the VP. She was the star. I just said, Zara repeated, projecting for the benefit of Senator Davenport's horrified wife. I hope the baby is Damien's. It's just, well, you two have been so distant. This was the ultimate mockery. To not only steal her husband, but to slander her fidelity, to attack the one pure thing she had left her child. You're implying I've been unfaithful? Josie asked. The question was a block of ice. I'm not implying anything, darling, Zara said, taking a casual step closer. She was acting for the crowd, playing the part of a concerned friend. I'm just saying, you've seemed so lonely, and Damien has been so busy, working with me. Late nights, early mornings. We've been practically inseparable, finalizing the Kestrel deal. A man that busy. Well, a woman gets needs. You are, Josie said, even more repulsive than I imagined. Zara laughed. Oh, stop being so puritanical, Josie. We're all adults. You got your storybook wedding. You got your trust fund. You're getting the heir. I'm getting the rest. The man. The power. The real Turner Empire. It seems like a fair trade to me. You think this is a trade? I know it is. Zara leaned in her voice, dropping back to a conspiratorial hiss, though everyone could still see her smug confidence. He's tired of you, Josie. He's tired of the good old money judgment. He's tired of your sad, pale face. He wants fire. He wants ambition. He wants someone who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. Her eyes raked over Josie's body. And look at you. You're a vessel. You're the past. I'm the future. He's just waiting for the right time to get rid of the inconvenience. She gestured pointedly at Josie's stomach. The cruelty was breathtaking. It was designed to shatter her, to make her weep, to make her scream, to make her run from the ballroom in shame. That was the victory Zara wanted. A public abdication. Josie felt the baby kick a hard, sudden jolt, as if he too could feel the venom in the air. That kick, it centered her. It wasn't just her reputation on the line. It was her child's. "You've thought this all through, haven't you?" Josie said. Her voice was shaking, but not with fear. It was with a rage so cold it was close to absolute zero. "From the moment I stepped into the boardroom," Zara admitted, her voice full of pride, "I saw him, and I knew. He was trapped. By his mother, by his name, and then by you. I'm not stealing him, Josie. I'm liberating him. And the company." "Are you liberating that too?" Josie asked, her tone conversational. Zara's eyes narrowed just a fraction, a flicker of confusion. "The company is the man, and I'm his best asset, the Kestrel deal. That's my masterpiece. It's going to double his net worth. I'm giving him the world. What are you giving him? A screaming, messy infant and a wife who's past her prime." "You're so sure of yourself," Josie said. "So sure of your masterpiece. So sure of him." "Of course I am," Zara scoffed. "He tells me everything. Unlike you, I'm his partner. He doesn't hide his late nights from me. I am his late nights." "He's right over there," Josie said, nodding her head slightly. "Why don't we ask him?" Zara's smile was blinding. "An excellent idea." She turned, her red dress swirling, and raised her hand. "Damien, darling." Damien, who had been deep in conversation with Julian Rothschild, looked over. He saw Zara beaming and Josie pale and still, his brow furrowed. This was not the stability he'd asked for. He excused himself and crossed the ballroom. The whispers intensified. The king was approaching the dueling queens. "What's going on?" Damien asked, his voice low and tight. He looked at Josie. "Is there a problem?" Before Josie could speak, Zara slid her hand into the crook of Damien's arm, a gesture of shocking intimacy. She leaned her head against his shoulder, a perfect picture of a damsel in distress. "Oh, Damien, I'm so glad you're here," Zara said, her voice suddenly trembling. "I was just trying to congratulate Josie on the baby, and she flew at me." Josie stared, astonished at the audacity of the lie. "She—" "What?" Damien said, looking at Josie with disbelief. "She accused me of the most awful things," Zara said, dabbing at a non-existent tear. "She said I was trying to replace her. And then she said I was trash." Zara turned her face into his jacket as if hiding a sob. "I was only trying to be nice, Damien. But she's so emotional. It must be the hormones." This was the move. To paint Josie as the hysterical, hormonal, jealous wife. Damien looked at Josie. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were cold. He was embarrassed. This was a scene. This was exactly what he'd warned her against. "Josie," he said, his voice a command. "Apologize to Zara, now." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Apologize to Zara. Josie looked at her husband, the man she had loved, or at least the man she had built a life with. He was standing there, his arm firmly around his mistress, who was pressing her face into his tuxedo, her body faking a delicate tremble, and he was looking at her, his pregnant wife, with pure, unadulterated annoyance. He believed the lie. Or more accurately, he chose to believe the lie because it was the fastest way to end the scene. The crowd was rapt. This was better than any Broadway play. The Tycoon, the pregnant wife, the stunning VP. They were watching Josie, waiting for her to crumble. "Apologize," Josie repeated. Her voice was quiet, but it carried in the silence. "Yes." "Apologize," Damien snapped, his patience gone. "You are making a spectacle of yourself. Zara is my colleague. She is vital to this company. You will not treat her this way." "Vital," Josie said, tasting the word. "Damien, please," Zara murmured. "It's fine. She's just not herself. Maybe she should go home. Rest." It was the perfect kill with kindness line. She was dismissing Josie, sending the child wife to her bed. Damien nodded, seizing the lifeline. "She's right. You're clearly overwrought." "Markham!" he called out, looking over the crowd for his head of security. "Markham, get the car. My wife is leaving." This was it, her lowest point. He wasn't just siding with the mistress. He was banishing his wife from their own event in front of everyone they knew, all to placate the woman he was sleeping with. He was sacrificing her and their child for the sake of his vital employee. The humiliation was a physical burn. She felt it on her cheeks, in her chest. She saw the pity in Senator Davenport's eyes. She saw the barely concealed smirk on Julian Rothschild's face. She was the fool, the cuckolded, pregnant, hysterical fool. "No," Josie said. Damien, who had started to turn away, froze. "What did you say, Sambour?" "I said no," Josie said. And this time her voice was different. The tremor was gone. It was replaced by the clear, cold steel precision of the lawyer she used to be, the one who could eviscerate a hostile witness without ever raising her voice. She took a step towards them. "I'm not going anywhere, and I will not apologize." "Josie, I am warning you." Damien hissed, his face darkening with rage. "Do not do this. Not here." "Oh, but this is the only place to do it," Josie said. She gave him a small, sad smile. "This is, after all, a night about transparency and charity, isn't it? Let's be transparent." She turned her gaze from her husband to the viper on his arm. "You're right, Zara," Josie said, her voice resonating through the ballroom. The string quartet had officially stopped playing. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. "You are a masterpiece, a brilliant, ambitious, bold woman. You were right about everything. This marriage is a shell. Damien is bored, and he does want a partner who can build with him." Zara's face, which had been hidden, slowly emerged from Damien's jacket. Her expression was one of pure, unadulterated triumph. She thought this was a surrender. "But you made one tiny, fatal mistake," Josie continued. "And what's that, darling?" Zara purred, her confidence restored. "Underestimating you." "Oh no," Josie said. "You didn't underestimate me. You underestimated him." She pointed at Damien. "You thought he was so blinded by, well, you, that he'd become a complete and utter fool. You thought the man who built a global empire from nothing wouldn't notice a $20 million rat chewing on his foundations." Damien's head snapped toward Josie. The color drained from his face. What are you talking about?" Zara's victorious smile faltered. It didn't disappear, but it froze at the edges. "Josie, you're rambling. You're hysterical. Damien, she's the Kestrel acquisition," Josie said, cutting her off. "Your masterpiece, the one you've been working on so closely. The one that's kept you and Damien in late-night sessions, For months. It's a brilliant deal, Zara said, her voice suddenly a half-octave higher. Damien knows. It's going to make you very rich, Josie finished. But not Turner Industries. She looked at Damien. You know, for a shark, darling, you have a remarkable blind spot. You were so busy enjoying the perks of your VP, you never bothered to do your own due diligence. Josie, enough, Damien commanded, but there was a new raw panic in his voice. No, I don't think it is, Josie said. Tell me, Damien, are you familiar with a shell corporation called Vance Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands? Zara. Vance went white, not pale, not wan. It was the bloodless, stark white of terror. She's lying, Zara shrieked, her hand clutching Damien's arm. She's making it up. She's a jealous, crazy... Am I? Josie said. She reached into her small, elegant evening bag and pulled out her phone. I was a corporate lawyer for 10 years, Damien. I specialized in forensic accounting and white-collar crime. While you were working with Zara, I was doing a little light reading, auditing her Kestrel files. She held up the phone. $20 million, siphoned from the acquisition fund, transferred in 3 separate wire payments to an offshore account. An account that, with a little help from my father's firm, I traced directly to Vance Holdings, sole proprietor house, Dara. The room was so quiet, Josie could hear the ice shifting in a glass 10 feet away. She's trying to frame me, Zara screamed. Damien, she hates me. She hates me because you love me. Damien Turner looked at Zara. He looked at her, and it was as if he was seeing her for the first time. The affair. That was an asset. It was an ego boost. The theft that was a betrayal. It wasn't just a betrayal of his trust. It was an insult to his intelligence. He hated more than anything being played for a fool. Is it true? He asked Zara. His voice was no longer angry. It was dead. No, Damien, baby, listen to me. He doesn't have to listen to you, Josie said. He can just read the email I sent 5 minutes ago, the one I sent to you, Damien, and to your mother, and to the entire board of Turner Industries. And just for good measure, to my contact at the SEC. That was the kill shot, the Securities and Exchange Commission. Zara Vance let go of Damien's arm. Her entire body had gone limp. The blood-red dress now looked like a shroud. You, she stammered, looking at Josie. You bitch. Yes, Josie said, one hand on her stomach. Now, as my husband was saying, I believe you were about to be leaving. The silence that followed Josie's words was absolute. It was a vacuum sucking all the air and warmth from the opulent ballroom. Every eye Senator Davenport's, Julian Rothschild's, Genevieve Turner's was fixed on the toxic triangle at the center of the room. Damien Turner hadn't moved. His face was a mask of cold fury. But it wasn't directed at Josie. It was directed at the woman who had just been exposed as a common thief. The affair was a misdemeanor. This was a capital crime. The SEC, he finally said, his voice a low growl. I had to be sure you'd take it seriously, Josie replied calmly. You seemed distracted. This was the final twist of the knife. It wasn't just that Zara had stolen. It was that Josie had been the one to catch her. The wife he had dismissed as a fragile incubator, a social ornament, had just saved his company from a multi-million-dollar fraud and a PR nightmare with the SEC. She hadn't just outplayed the Mistress. She had outplayed him. Zara, seeing the look on Damien's face, knew the game was over. The man was gone. The job was gone. Her life was over. She went from predator to prey in a single heartbeat. "No. No, Damien, please," she whimpered, reaching for him. "It was a mistake. It was a golden prosciutto. You told me you'd always protect me. You said I was your partner." Damien recoiled from her touch as if she were diseased. "You stole from me. I did it for us." Zara cried, her composure shattering into 1,000 pieces. "So we could have a future. So we wouldn't have to worry about her taking everything in a divorce." It was a desperate, pathetic lie, and everyone knew it. Damien Turner, Tycoon, Predator, and King, did not yell. He did not scream. He simply lifted his chin. His gaze moving past Josie, past Zara to the edge of the room. His voice was calm. "Markham." A large man in a perfectly tailored black suit detached himself from the wall. Markham was Damien's head of security, a former Secret Service agent who was paid a fortune to be invisible until he wasn't. He and 2 other men, also in dark suits, began to move through the crowd. They didn't run. They walked a slow, methodical, terrifying advance. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. Zara's eyes widened in terror. "Damien! No, you can't do this. Not here, Damien. I love you." "Damien." Turner turned his back on her. He turned his back and faced his wife. He looked at Josie, at her calm, steady expression, at the hand resting on their unborn son. His expression was unreadable. It was a maelstrom of rage, humiliation, and a new, terrifying flicker of respect. He had been played by both women, but only one of them had won. "Markham," Damien said again, his voice flat. "Ms. Vance is no longer an employee of this company. She is trespassing. Please escort her from the premises." "Damien, no!" Zara shrieked as Markham reached her. "Ms. Vance," Markham said, his voice as quiet and final as a closing vault. "Please come with us." "Get your hands off me," Zara screeched, batting at his arm. "Do you know who I am? You're a thief," Josie said, her voice cutting through Zara's hysteria. Zara lunged, not at Damien, but at Josie. It was a primal, desperate, animalistic move, her hands clawed, aiming for Josie's face. She never made it. Markham, with reflexes born of protecting politicians, moved faster than anyone thought possible. He didn't just block her. He caught her by the upper arms, his grip like a steel trap. Zara's momentum was stopped so fast, her head snapped back. "Don't touch her," Markham growled, and that was the end of Zara Vance. The 2 other security men grabbed her. This was no gentle escort. This was the title of the story made real. This was the mistress mocked the pregnant wife, but the Tycoon's security dragged her out in front of everyone. They didn't just walk her out. They lifted her. Her designer heels, the ones she'd bought with Damien's stolen money, scraped uselessly against the marble floor. She was dragged. Right through the center of the Orion Grand Ballroom, past the champagne fountain, past Julian Rothschild, who watched with undisguised fascination, past Senator Davenport, who looked away as if embarrassed, past Genevieve Turner, who watched with a look of cold, grim satisfaction. Zara's screams echoed off the high, frescoed ceilings. You'll regret this, Damien. You need me, Josie. You barren bitch. I'll kill you both. Her blood-red dress twisted and hitched up her thigh. Her hair, once so sleek, was a frantic mess. She was no longer a shark. She was chum. They dragged her through the grand lobby, past the stunned coat-check girls, and out into the flashing cameras of the paparazzi, who, sensing blood in the water, had surged toward the entrance. Her final screaming curses were cut off as the heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung shut, plunging the room back into a heavy tomb-like silence. The silence that Zara left behind was louder than her screams. The string quartet remained motionless, their bows hovering over their instruments. Hundreds of pairs of eyes which had followed Zara's humiliating exit now snapped back to the two people left standing in the center of the floor, Damien and Josie Turner. Josie stood poised and still, her hand never leaving her stomach. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't cried. She had simply watched. Damien stared at the doors, his chest rising and falling. His public face was a mask of iron, but Josie could see the muscle twitching in his jaw. He was a man who had just had his kingdom saved, and his ego shattered in the same breath by the same person. He turned to her. The room held its collective breath. What would the king do to the queen who had just checkmated him in public? You, he began, his voice a strained whisper. You sent it to the SEC. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. She hadn't just handled a family problem. She had exposed his company to federal oversight. Yes, Josie said clearly, for him and for the listening ears of the board members nearby. Corporate fraud is a serious crime, Damien. I assumed you'd want to be fully compliant with the law. As a majority shareholder, I certainly did. She had just reminded him and everyone that she wasn't just his wife. Through her family trust and her prenuptial agreement, she was a shareholder. She had a stake. You humiliated me, he hissed. You let this thief make a fool of me in my own company for months. You let me make a fool of myself tonight in front of everyone. Did I? Josie asked. Or did you? She finally took a step toward him, closing the distance. She looked up into his cold, furious eyes. The mockery wasn't that she thought the baby wasn't yours, Damien. She said, her voice devastatingly quiet. The mockery was that she thought you were so blinded by your own ego that you wouldn't notice $20 million was missing. And she was right. She paused, letting the truth of it land. You didn't notice, I did. She held his gaze, and for the first time, Damien Turner looked away. He had no response. She had told the truth. He, the great Tycoon, had been so busy with the perks of his affair that he had missed a massive embezzlement happening right under his nose. His wife, the one he'd sidelined and ignored, had been the only one minding the store. Josie looked around the room. The guests were frozen. The party was dead. She did not wait for him to dismiss her. She did not wait for his permission. She turned from her husband and began to walk. She didn't walk toward the exit. She walked with slow, regal purpose toward the head table. The table where she was supposed to be seated. She walked past his mother, Genevieve, who looked at Josie with a new, sharp and terrifying approval. Josie reached the table, picked up her own untouched glass of water, and took a sip. She turned to the stunned crowd. Please, she said, her voice projecting with the calm authority of the building's true owner. Don't let a small personnel issue ruin this wonderful evening. The Foundation's work is too important." She then turned to the leader of the string quartet. "Maestro. Vivaldi, I believe. Please continue." The maestro, stunned, nodded. He raised his bow, and the music, shaky at first, began to fill the silence. It was the ultimate power move. She hadn't just won. She had taken control. She had fired the mistress, neutered her husband, and restarted her own party in the span of 10 minutes. Damien Turner was left standing alone in the middle of the floor, the whispers now following him. He was the fool, the one who had been played. Slowly, his fists unclenching, he composed his face. He smoothed his tuxedo. He was a tycoon, and the show must go on. He walked to the head table and sat down, not next to his wife, but 2 chairs down. They sat there for the rest of the gala, separated by an icy chasm of exposed lies and cold, hard numbers. They were the perfect, powerful couple smiling for the cameras. But the room knew. The world would know by morning. Zara Vance was just the opening act. The real fall was that of Damien Turner's infallible image. And the rise, cold and brilliant as the diamond on her finger, was that of Josie Turner. The drive home to the penthouse was a study in pressurized silence. The interior of the Rolls-Royce, usually a cocoon of quiet luxury, felt like a decompression chamber on the verge of catastrophic failure. The city blurred past the tinted windows, the vibrant lights of New York fracturing like shattered jewels through Josie's tired eyes. She was exhausted, the adrenaline of the confrontation draining away, leaving behind the profound, bone-deep weariness of her pregnancy and the hollow ache of her victory. Beside her, Damien was a statue carved from ice. He didn't speak. He didn't look at her. He just stared straight ahead, his hands fisted on his knees, his entire being vibrating with a rage so profound it was for now silent. Josie could feel the heat of his humiliation radiating from him. The only sound was the almost imperceptible click of the turn signal as their driver, oblivious to the nuclear bomb that had detonated in the ballroom, navigated the familiar route home. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was the final agonizing ascent. The mirrored walls reflected the 2 of them, the conquering queen weary and heavy with child, and the deposed king, his armor of arrogance rent in 2. The soft ding, as the doors opened to their private lobby, was deafening. Damien strode into the marble entryway. He didn't wait for her, nor did he help her with her wrap. He went straight to the minimalist glass bar, his movements stiff and economical. The sharp, scraping sound of the crystal decanter stopper being pulled was an act of violence. The glug, glug, glug of the 18-year-old scotch filling his glass was an accusation. Josie didn't follow. She kicked off her heels, the small human act of surrender to her aching feet. She walked past him, her hand on her stomach, and went to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. The view, which had once felt like a cage, now just looked distant. A map of a life that no longer belonged to her. She waited. She had won the public war. This was the private, unconditional surrender. Damien downed the first glass in 2 swallows, the burn in his throat a welcome distraction from the fire in his gut. He poured a second, his hand shaking slightly. He was replaying the night. The SEC. His mother's face, that terrible look of cold, calculating approval directed at Josie. The undisguised pity from Julian Rothschild. The smirks. He was Damien Turner. He was not a man to be pitied. He was not a fool. And yet, "You knew for months," he finally said, his voice a low, rough growl. Josie didn't turn. "Yes. You knew. You sat at my table. You let me talk about our son. You slept in my bed, all while you were sharpening the knife. I was gathering data, she replied, her voice reflecting off the cold glass. Gathering data, he roared, spinning to face her. Is that what you call it? You were building a case like I was some hostile target. You were, she said. And now she turned her eyes as clear and hard as the diamonds at her throat. The moment you brought a predator into your bed, you became a liability to your own company. And as a shareholder, I had a fiduciary duty to protect my investment. And my son's. My God, he whispered, a look of genuine shock on his face. Your investment? Was that all it ever was? This marriage, this child? This marriage, Josie said, taking a step toward him, was a partnership, a sacred trust, and you violated it. You voided every clause the moment you decided my use was finished. You wanted a builder. Zara was right. I am a builder. I just spent the last 3 months building a cage for her, and a very different one for you. He stared at her, the bravado draining away, leaving behind a hollowed-out, defeated man. What did you want Josie to humiliate me, to destroy me? I wanted to survive. She shot back, the first tremor of her own agony, breaking through the ice. You, the great man, were so blinded by your own ego, so desperate for a younger, hotter version of the shark you used to be, that you were handing your kingdom, our son's kingdom, to a common con artist. You didn't notice $20 million was missing, Damien. You were too busy. So I did. He flinched. That was the truth that stung more than the infidelity. The insult to his intelligence. He had been played. She said, he stammered, looking for any weapon he could find. The baby, is it? And Josie's face didn't just harden. It collapsed into a mask of pure, devastating scorn. She physically recoiled, one hand flying to her chest as if he had struck her. Don't you dare, she whispered the words, trembling with a rage that eclipsed his own. Don't you dare for 1 second try to use her poison as your shield, that you would even let that filth into your head, that you would repeat it to me now. It proves you never knew me at all. It proves you are a weaker, more pathetic man than even I thought. He had the grace to look shattered. The last of his anger vanished, replaced by a grey, desolate shame. Josie, I'm sorry. You're sorry you got caught, she said instantly, her voice flat and devoid of all emotion. You're sorry you looked stupid. You're sorry she insulted your intelligence. You're sorry you lost $20 million. You are not sorry for the affair. You are only sorry for the consequences. He couldn't answer. He just stared into his glass, because she was right. I want a divorce, Damien. She said, the words landing in the quiet room with the finality of a gavel. A quiet one, an amicable split for the papers. We can blame irreconcilable differences. We will share custody of our son. But you and I, we are finished. He looked up, panic dawning in his eyes. This was not the script. He was supposed to be angry. She was supposed to be weeping. He was supposed to fix this. Josie, wait, he said, setting his glass down, taking a step toward her. We can fix this. The company. My God, Josie, I need you. You saved it. Genevieve, my mother, she called you brilliant. She wants you on the board. She wants you to take Zara's place. Josie let out a short, bitter laugh that was half a sob. Of course she does. I just saved her fortune. She doesn't care who you're sleeping with, Damien, as long as the stock price is stable, but no. No, he repeated, dumbfounded. I'm not interested in being your partner, Damien. I'm not interested in cleaning up your messes. I saved my assets, and my sons. The company was just the battlefield. I am not going to spend the rest of my life watching your back, waiting for the next Zara to come along and blind you with flattery. I'm taking my shares, my son, and my name, and I'm leaving. She started to walk past him toward their bedroom. Josie, he called out, his voice raw with a desperation she had never heard from him. Wait, please don't I get a second chance? She stopped at the doorway, her back to him. She rested her forehead against the cool wood for just a moment, gathering the very last of her strength. Damien, she said without turning, you don't get to cheat and be stupid. I might have been able to forgive one in time, but I can't forgive both. She walked into the bedroom and closed the door, the soft, decisive click of the latch, the only sound. Four months later, the air in the apartment was warm, filled with the scent of lemon oil, fresh laundry, and sweet, milky baby powder. Sunlight streamed through the large bay windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing over the overflowing bookshelves and the old, polished hardwood floors. Josie Hayes, she had taken her maiden name back with a vengeance, rocked gently in a comfortable overstuffed armchair, humming as she finished buttoning her son's sleeper. In her arms, Thomas Hayes Turner, 6 weeks old and perfectly healthy, yawned and stretched. Her new apartment on the Upper West Side was a world away from the penthouse. It wasn't a showplace. It was a home. The divorce had been swift and surgically clean. As Josie had predicted, Genevieve Turner, ever the pragmatist, had stepped in. It was not a settlement. It was a transaction. Josie traded her silence, and all her Turner shares that had doubled in value after she'd prevented the Kestrel disaster, for a cash buyout that was by any standard astronomical. Genevieve had fought to secure the dynasty, a silent acknowledgement from one matriarch to another that Josie had won. As for Zara Vance, her fall had been as swift as it was brutal. Indicted on 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 of corporate embezzlement, her face had been plastered across the Post and the Journal. Facing a minimum of 15 years, her high-priced Turner-funded lawyers had dropped her the day after the gala. Josie's legal team had informed her that Zara, friendless and bankrupt, was expected to take whatever plea the U.S. attorney offered. Josie pushed Thomas's stroller through the crisp January air of Central Park. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. She felt light. She heard the footsteps on the gravel path behind her. Expensive leather-soled shoes, steady and hesitant. She didn't have to turn. Josie. She stopped and turned. Damien stood a few feet away. He looked smaller somehow, thinner. He wasn't wearing his usual armor of a bespoke suit, just a simple dark overcoat and scarf. Hello, Damien. His eyes went immediately to the stroller. He looks healthy. Big. He is, Josie said, her voice neutral. He's a good eater. I brought him something, Damien said, awkwardly. He held out a small, iconic light blue bag. From it, he pulled a small, ridiculously expensive-looking silver rattle from Tiffany's. It was a beautiful, impersonal, and predictable gift. It was his language. Josie looked at the rattle, then at him. It's lovely. You can give it to him on Saturday, Damien. It's your visitation day. 2 o'clock, remember. My nanny will have him ready. The words, though polite, were a clear boundary. He was not family. He was a co-parent with a schedule. "Right. Saturday," he said, lowering his hand, looking lost. He cleared his throat. "The company. It's stable. The SEC investigation was contained. Your data was meticulous. They're satisfied." "Good," she said, preparing to turn the stroller. "Josie, wait. I'm in therapy." That made her pause. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the weariness around his eyes. It was the first truly human thing he had said to her in almost a year. "Good for you, Damien," she said, and she meant it. "I hope it helps." "It is," he said, taking a half step closer. "It's making me see a lot of things. About my mother. About me. I was wondering if we, after some time, could find a way back." Josie held up a hand, and he stopped. "No," she said, but it was not unkind. "I'm glad you're getting help, Damien. I truly am, for your own sake, and for Thomas's. He deserves a father who is present and whole. But I am not a project for you to win back. I'm not an acquisition. I'm done." He nodded, the old Tycoon's pride flashing for a second. He hated losing. You really despise me, don't you? After all this?" Josie thought for a long, quiet moment. She looked at her sleeping son, his perfect, tiny face, serene, the only good and pure thing to come from the wreckage. She looked back at the man, who was now essentially a stranger. "No, Damien," she said, and it was the absolute honest truth. "I don't despise you." She pushed a stray wisp of hair from her face, her eyes meeting his. "I just don't think about you at all." She turned the stroller. The quiet whir of the wheels on the path was the only sound. She walked away, not looking back, pushing her son toward the patch of bright sunlight ahead, leaving her former husband standing alone, a useless silver rattle in his hand, in the deep, cold shade of the winter trees. And that was the fall of Zara Vance and the rise of Josie Turner. Josie proved that the sharpest weapon isn't always volume, but intelligence. She didn't just get mad. She got everything. What did you think of Josie's revenge? Was it too cold, or was it the perfect response to a double betrayal? She lost her husband, but she gained her freedom, her self-respect, and a new life for her son. Let us know in the comments what you would have done in her position. If you loved this story of drama and consequences, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see a true power move, and of course, subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories every single week. You won't want to miss what we have coming next. He called her his greatest asset, but treated her like a beautiful, silent piece of art. To the world, Lorenzo Holston was a titan of industry, a man who had built a hospitality empire from the ground up. His wife, Felicity, was the quiet, elegant woman by his side, the perfect hostess in their gilded cage. But in the glittering world of high society, secrets are the most valuable currency. Tonight, at the grand unveiling of his flagship restaurant, Lorenzo will make the mistake of his life. He will flaunt his mistress, believing his wife is too timid to react. He has forgotten one crucial detail. A signature on a piece of paper is more powerful than a name in lights. The silence in the penthouse was a physical presence. It lived in the vast, empty spaces between the minimalist Italian furniture and clung to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city's glittering skyline. Felicity Davies Holston knew this silence intimately. It was the soundtrack to her 5-year marriage. She traced the rim of a porcelain teacup, her reflection a pale, distorted oval on its surface. Outside, the city pulsed with life, but in here, on the 80th floor of the Olympus building, time seemed to move at the speed of Lorenzo's convenience. Her husband, Lorenzo Halston, was a man carved from ambition and arrogance. He wasn't just loud. His very presence consumed the oxygen in a room. To the public, he was the charismatic founder of Halston Hospitality, a rapidly expanding empire of luxury hotels and Michelin-starred restaurants. He was on the cover of Fortune and Apex Business Quarterly. His narrative, a carefully constructed fable of a self-made man with a Midas touch. Felicity knew the truth. The empire wasn't built from the ground up by him. It was built on a foundation so old and deep that Lorenzo couldn't even comprehend its scale. A foundation he had been handed, not one he had laid. The chime of his phone left carelessly on the marble island, sliced through the quiet. Felicity didn't need to look. She knew the name that would be on the screen: Tiffany Blair. Tiffany, the impossibly blonde, surgically enhanced public relations consultant Lorenzo had hired 6 months ago. Her public relations duties seemed to extend far beyond boardrooms and press releases usually taking place in 5-star hotel suites during Lorenzo's business trips. "Lissy, darling." Lorenzo's voice boomed as he strode into the kitchen, already dressed in a bespoke tuxedo. He smelled of expensive cologne and self-satisfaction. "Is my Patek on the dresser, the rose gold one? It needs to match the cufflinks." He didn't wait for an answer, already moving towards the master suite. He treated her less like a wife and more like a highly intuitive but ultimately invisible domestic assistant. In the beginning, she had believed his charm. He had pursued her with a relentless energy, captivated by her quiet grace and what he called her old-world elegance. He had no idea how literal that description was. Felicity came from old money, but a reclusive, intensely private kind. Her father, the late Jonathan Davies, had built Northgate Holdings, a silent behemoth of real estate finance and private equity. He despised the limelight and had raised his only daughter to value discretion above all else. When Felicity met Lorenzo, a promising but moderately successful hotel manager, she saw a spark of drive she admired. Weary of suitors who only saw her family's name, she had allowed Lorenzo to believe she was from a comfortable but unremarkable background. She wanted to be loved for herself. It was a naive, romantic notion that had curdled into a slow, corrosive regret. They married, and with her father's blessing, she used a fraction of her inheritance channeled through a labyrinthine series of trusts to anonymously fund Lorenzo's ambitions. Northgate Holdings created Halston Hospitality as a subsidiary, installing Lorenzo as its public-facing president. He was given a generous salary, unlimited expenses, and the illusion of ownership. The condition stipulated by Felicity was that the true source of the funding remained a secret. Lorenzo, blinded by the sudden influx of limitless capital, eagerly agreed, concocting a story about a consortium of silent European investors who believed in his genius. "Did you hear me, Lissy?" he called from the bedroom. "I need the watch. It's in the top right drawer of the mahogany chest, Lorenzo." She replied, her voice even. "Where it always is?" He reappeared, fastening the watch to his wrist. He paused, looking her up and down. She was wearing a simple, elegant navy blue dress. It was timeless, understated, and worth more than the car Tiffany Blair drove. "Is that what you're wearing?" he asked, a faint frown creasing his brow. "It's a bit plain for tonight, isn't it? The launch of the Aperture Club is the biggest event of the year. My biggest event." My. He always said my. My company, my success, my restaurant. I think it's appropriate, she said softly. Appropriate doesn't get you on the society pages, darling, he scoffed, adjusting his bow tie in the reflection of a chrome appliance. Tiffany is having a custom gown flown in from Milan. Now that's how you make an entrance. He said it without a hint of shame, as if discussing the catering. The casual cruelty was worse than any shouted accusation. It was the cruelty of indifference. He didn't even see her as a person with feelings to hurt anymore. She was just a fixture, a piece of the scenery in the grand play of his life. For months, Felicity had endured the humiliation, the whispers at charity balls, the pitying looks from the other wives, the photos snapped by paparazzi of Lorenzo and Tiffany, leaving a late-night dinner, his arm slung possessively around her. Felicity had held on to the hope that the man she thought she had married was still in there, somewhere, buried beneath the ego. She had honored her promise to her father to live a private life. But her father was also a man of immense pride and strength. He would never have tolerated this level of disrespect. Lorenzo's phone chimed again. He snatched it up, a wide grin spreading across his face as he read the message. Tiffany's just sent a picture of the dress. Spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. A real showstopper. He typed a rapid reply, his thumbs flying across the screen. Felicity watched him, and in that moment, something within her, a long dormant thing made of steel and resolve, finally clicked into place. The naive girl who wanted to be loved for herself was gone. In her place was the daughter of Jonathan Davies, the sole heiress of Northgate Holdings, a woman who owned this penthouse, the tuxedo on her husband's back, the watch on his wrist, and the restaurant he was about to launch. He had mistaken her silence for weakness. He was about to learn it was the quiet hum of an engine gathering power before a storm. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea. It had gone cold. Lorenzo, she said, her voice cutting through his self-absorbed reverie. It had a new edge to it, a cool precision that made him look up. What is it? We need to be leaving in 20 minutes. You're right, she said, standing up and placing her cup in the sink. Tonight is going to be a very big night. One for the history books. He smirked, misinterpreting her words entirely. That's the spirit, darling. Finally getting excited. Just try and look happy for the cameras, will you? It reflects well on me. As she walked past him towards her own dressing room, a plan began to form in her mind. It was audacious, terrifying, and absolutely necessary. She had spent 5 years as a ghost in her own life. Tonight she would become a queen, and she would watch his counterfeit kingdom burn to the ground. Felicity closed the door to her dressing room, a vast space of polished sycamore and soft grey carpets that served as her sanctuary. For a moment, she leaned against the cool wood, her heart hammering against her ribs. It wasn't fear. It was the exhilarating, terrifying rush of a decision made. The dam of her restraint built over years of quiet observation and swallowed pride had finally broken. She walked over to a discreet biometric safe hidden behind a full-length mirror. She pressed her thumb to the scanner, and the panel slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, amongst her family heirlooms and personal documents, was a simple encrypted satellite phone. A direct line. She had used it only a handful of times since her father's death, always for matters of the gravest importance regarding the holdings. This qualified. She dialed the only number stored in its memory. It rang once before a familiar voice, calm and impeccably professional, answered. Felicity. I was wondering when you might call. Desmond Pierce had been her father's most trusted advisor, the executor of his estate and the acting CEO of Northgate Holdings. He was a man in his late 60s, with a mind like a steel trap and a loyalty to the Davies family that was absolute. He knew about Lorenzo. He knew about the arrangement. And he had been waiting patiently for his true employer's instructions. Desmond Felicity said, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "It's time." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, not of surprise, but of contemplation. "Are you certain?" "Once this process begins, it is irreversible." "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," she said, her eyes catching her own reflection in the mirror. She saw a flicker of her father's iron will there. "Lorenzo is hosting the launch of the Aperture Club tonight, at 9 o'clock. He intends to publicly humiliate me with his mistress. I intend to correct the public record." Desmond absorbed this information. A public venue. That is bold. It will be messy. He has made it messy, Desmond. I am simply cleaning up, she countered. I want you to activate Protocol Scion. Full asset reclamation. Effective immediately. Protocol Scion. It was a name she and Desmond had conceived of years ago, a contingency plan for this very scenario. A corporate kill switch designed to dismantle the entire artifice of Lorenzo Halston's career in a single, swift stroke. Understood, Desmond said. His voice now held a note of grim efficiency. The legal team has had the paperwork on standby for over a year. I will need your verbal authorization for 3 key actions. First, the immediate termination of Mr. Halston's employment contract as president of Halston Hospitality, citing the gross misconduct clause. Authorized. Felicity said the word tasting like freedom. Second, the freezing of all corporate and personal credit lines. Bank accounts and assets tied to his name through the Halston Hospitality salary and bonus structure. Authorized. And third, Desmond continued the transfer of all operational authority directly to you as the sole proprietor and chairwoman of the parent company, Northgate Holdings. We will need to make a public statement. That is the point of tonight, Desmond Felicity replied. The statement will be made in person. I need you and a small legal team at the Aperture Club. Say 10 o'clock, we will be there. I will bring Mr. Henshaw from legal and 2 of our senior security personnel. Discreet but effective. Perfect. One more thing. I need you to find out who made Tiffany Blair's dress. Desmond was momentarily thrown. Her dress. Yes. Lorenzo mentioned it was being flown in from Milan. A custom piece. Find the designer, the house, the atelier. I want to know its exact cost. And I want you to arrange for the invoice to be delivered to her personally in the middle of the event tonight. With a note that her benefactor's credit line has been permanently severed. A slow, appreciative smile could be heard in Desmond's voice. The daughter of Jonathan Davies indeed. Consider it done, Felicity. We will see you at 10. She ended the call and placed the phone back in the safe. A wave of calm washed over her. The machinery was in motion. The gears of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise were now turning at her command, aligning to execute a single devastating purpose. She turned to her wardrobe. The navy blue dress, which Lorenzo had called plain, now seemed insufficient, not for making a statement of wealth, but for making a statement of power. She pushed it aside and walked towards the very back to a garment bag she hadn't opened in years. Inside was the last gown her father had commissioned for her for a gala they were to attend together before he passed away. It was a masterpiece of deep emerald silk, cut in a style that was both regal and fiercely modern. It was not a dress for a quiet wife. It was a dress for a queen. As she slipped it on, the fabric felt like armor. She complimented it not with loud, flashy jewels, but with a simple, elegant diamond necklace and earrings that had belonged to her grandmother, pieces whose value was not in their size, but in their history and flawless clarity. They whispered wealth. They didn't scream it. When she emerged from the dressing room 40 minutes later, Lorenzo was impatiently pacing in the living area, checking his phone. Finally, he started to say, then stopped dead. He stared at her, his jaw slackening slightly. He had never seen her like this. The dress, the jewels, the newfound confidence in her posture, it was a combination that completely unsettled him. She was, for the first time, not the Felicity he knew. She was breathtakingly beautiful, but in a way that was suddenly intimidating. Wow, he stammered, recovering slightly. Okay. That's much better. Much better. Where did that come from? It was in the back of my closet, she said, her voice a placid sea, belying the Leviathan moving in its depths. She picked up a small matching clutch from the table. Well, you should wear it more often, he said, his ego quickly reasserting itself. He interpreted her transformation as an effort to please him, to compete for his attention. So you can still pull it out of the bag when you want to. Now let's go. I don't want to be late for my own party. My own party. The words hung in the air. As they rode the private elevator down in silence, Lorenzo was busy scrolling through social media, tracking the buzz for the event. And Aperture Club. Launch was already trending. He was giddy with anticipation. Felicity watched the floor numbers descend. 80, 79, 78. Each floor was a step down from her sanctuary and a step closer to the battlefield. She was not nervous. She felt a clarity she hadn't experienced in years. Lorenzo thought tonight was his coronation. He had no idea it was his public execution, and she was the one who had signed the warrant. The Aperture Club was the crown jewel of Lorenzo's perceived empire, and its launch party was a testament to his unrestrained extravagance. Located on the top floor of a newly constructed skyscraper that pierced the heart of the financial district, the restaurant was a symphony of bronze marble and glass. A massive retractable skylight, the Aperture, gave the space its name, promising diners a view of the stars. Tonight, however, the main event was the constellation of socialites, city magnates, and media personalities glittering below. The moment they stepped out of the chauffeured car, they were bombarded by the flash of cameras. Lorenzo, in his element, beamed and waved, pulling Felicity close. His hand on the small of her back felt proprietary, a brand. She smiled, a serene, enigmatic expression that the photographers couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't the happy, adoring gaze of a trophy wife. It was something else, something knowing. Inside, the air thrummed with champagne-fueled chatter and the smooth sounds of a live jazz quartet. Waitstaff moved through the throng with trays of oysters and caviar. Lorenzo immediately launched into his role as king of the castle, greeting guests with loud backslaps and booming laughs, accepting congratulations for his magnificent achievement. "Lorenzo, my boy, you've outdone yourself," exclaimed a portly real estate developer named Bill Peterson. "Just the beginning." "Bill, just the beginning," Lorenzo roared. "We're changing the game, Holston. Hospitality is the future." Felicity stood by his side, a silent, graceful counterpoint to his bombast. She nodded politely, accepted compliments on his behalf, and played her part to perfection. But beneath the surface she was a predator, scanning the room, marking her targets, and counting the minutes. 9:15 p.m. Desmond would be making his final preparations. She watched as Lorenzo's eyes constantly darted towards the entrance. He was waiting. And right on cue at 9:30 p.m. the crowd near the doorway parted with a collective murmur. Tiffany Blair had arrived. She was not so much wearing a dress as she was inhabiting a spectacle. It was a creation of shimmering fire engine red sequins, cut dangerously low at the front and impossibly high at the side. It was designed to command attention to scream its own expense, and Tiffany wore it with the unshakable confidence of a woman who believes she has already won. Lorenzo's face lit up with a triumphant, possessive grin. He excused himself from the group he was with and strode purposefully towards her. He didn't offer a discreet greeting. He made a show of it. He took both her hands, kissed her loudly on both cheeks, and spun her around for the benefit of the room. "There she is." His voice boomed, silencing the nearby conversations. "The secret weapon behind our team, the one and only Tiffany Blair. Doesn't she look like $1 million? More like 150,000 to be precise." Felicity thought a cold sliver of amusement touching her lips. Desmond was efficient. Tiffany basked in the attention, her smile wide and predatory. Her eyes found Felicity across the room and held her gaze for a fraction of a second. It was a look of pure, unadulterated victory. A look that said, "He's mine. This world is mine." "You are irrelevant." Felicity simply held her gaze, her expression unchanging, before turning to accept a glass of water from a passing waiter. Her calmness was a weapon Tiffany couldn't comprehend. The mistress expected tears, a scene, a retreat. She didn't know how to react to this placid indifference. For the next half hour, Lorenzo paraded Tiffany around the room like a prize. He introduced her to his most important contacts, lauding her brilliant marketing mind. It was a flimsy pretext that fooled no one. They were an item, and he was deliberately and cruelly rubbing it in his wife's face. Felicity watched it all. She saw the uncomfortable shifting of some guests, the gleeful gossip of others. She noted who was loyal, who was opportunistic, and who was simply enjoying the drama. It was all valuable data. She found a quiet spot near the panoramic windows, overlooking the sprawling city lights that glittered like a fallen sky. This was all hers. The building they were in stood on land owned by a Northgate subsidiary. The construction had been financed by a Northgate investment fund. The catering company, the security firm, the valet service, all were contracted through businesses in which Northgate held a significant stake. Lorenzo was a child playing with his father's toys, completely oblivious to the fact that his mother owned the entire toy store. "A bit overwhelming, isn't it?" a voice said beside her. She turned to see Robert Chen, a respected older banker, whose firm had a long-standing and very discreet relationship with Northgate Holdings. He was one of the few people in the room who knew who she truly was. "Hello, Robert," she said warmly. "It is quite the spectacle." Robert looked across the room at Lorenzo, who was now laughing obnoxiously, with his arm draped around Tiffany's shoulders. "He's a peacock, that husband of yours," he said, his voice low. "Always has been. But peacocks can't fly very high. They just strut and make a lot of noise." He took a sip of his drink, his eyes twinkling. "I always wondered when you'd get tired of the noise." "The acoustics in this room are certainly revealing," Felicity replied, her words chosen with care. Robert nodded, understanding her meaning perfectly. "Indeed. Well, if you ever decide to change the music, you know you have friends who value a more classical composition." He gave her a subtle, supportive nod and moved away. The brief exchange solidified her resolve. This wasn't just about personal betrayal anymore. It was about legacy. Lorenzo's gaudy, reckless behavior was a stain on the quiet, dignified empire her father had built. 9:55 p.m. 5 minutes. Felicity began to move from the window, her path taking her on a slow, deliberate collision course with the center of the room where Lorenzo held court. He saw her approaching, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Her presence was an inconvenience to his grand performance with Tiffany. "Ah, darling," he said, his tone patronizing as she drew near. "Getting sociable, are we? I want you to properly meet Tiffany. Tiffany, this is my wife, Felicity." Tiffany offered a saccharine smile. "It's so lovely to finally be introduced," she purred, emphasizing the finally with dripping condescension. "Your husband is just the most brilliant man I have ever met. The vision he has for this place, it's legendary." "My husband is certainly ambitious," Felicity replied, her voice as smooth as polished marble. Lorenzo, feeling emboldened by the audience and the champagne, decided to push his humiliation a step further. He draped his arm more firmly around Tiffany, pulling her into his side. "Lissy is more of the quiet homebody type," he announced to the circle of onlookers. "She handles the charities and the dinner parties. I handle the real work, the building of empires. We all have our strengths, don't we?" It was the final public dismissal, the moment she had been waiting for. She looked him directly in the eye, her placid mask finally falling away to reveal the chilling calm beneath. "You're mistaken, Lorenzo," she said, her voice not loud, but carrying with such sudden authority that the entire group fell silent. "Your strength isn't in building empires, it's in public relations, and you've just made your last official statement." Before he could process the strange finality of her words, the grand double doors of the restaurant swung open. The ambient chatter of the party died down as everyone turned to look. Framed in the doorway stood Desmond Pierce, flanked by two imposing men in sharp, dark suits. He was the picture of gravitas, his silver hair immaculate, his expression unreadable. He held a leather folio in his hand. The clock on the far wall struck 10. The performance was over. The reckoning had begun. The arrival of Desmond Pierce and his associates had an immediate chilling effect on the room's atmosphere. The jazz quartet faltered, then fell silent. The lively hum of conversation evaporated, replaced by a tense, expectant hush. These were not party guests. These were men who moved with an unnerving purpose. Their presence a stark black and white photograph dropped into a colorful oil painting. Lorenzo stared, his brow furrowed in confusion. He recognized Desmond Pierce, of course, but only in a vague peripheral sense. He was the stone-faced lawyer type who handled the initial paperwork for the investor consortium years ago. He was a background character, a functionary. What was he doing, crashing the biggest night of his life? "Who the hell is that?" Tiffany whispered, her sequined facade looking suddenly cheap under the harsh reality of the intrusion. Lorenzo waved a dismissive hand, trying to reclaim control. "Party crashers! Security!" he called out, though his voice lacked its usual booming confidence. Desmond's gaze swept the room, calm and assessing, before it landed on the trio at its center. He began to walk forward, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The two men with him fanned out, not aggressively, but with an unmistakable air of authority, creating a clear path. The crowd parted before them like the Red Sea. "Mr. Halston," Desmond said, his voice level and devoid of any warmth. It cut through the silence like a scalpel. He stopped, a respectful but firm 10 feet away. Pierce! Lorenzo snapped, his face reddening with anger. This is a private event. Whatever it is you want, it can wait until Monday morning. Now get out before I have you thrown out. I'm afraid it cannot wait, Desmond replied, his eyes briefly flicking to Felicity. He saw the resolute look on her face and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The signal was received. I am here on behalf of the beneficial owner of Northgate Holdings, the parent company of Holston Hospitality. A ripple of confusion went through the assembled guests. Northgate Holdings. The name was known only in the most elite financial circles, a mythical entity that never sought the spotlight. What did it have to do with Lorenzo's trendy restaurant chain? Lorenzo laughed, a harsh, braying sound. Northgate. That's my silent partner. My money. You have no authority to speak to me here. You report to me, old man. Now I'm warning you. You are mistaken, Mr. Holston. Desmond interrupted, his tone hardening. I do not report to you. I report to her. And with that, he turned his head and looked directly at Felicity. Every eye in the room followed his gaze. For a moment, there was a collective silent processing of this impossible statement. The quiet, mousy wife. The background fixture. It didn't make sense. Lorenzo's laugh caught in his throat. Her. You mean Felicity? What the hell are you talking about? She doesn't know the first thing about business. She plans garden parties. Tiffany snorted with derisive laughter, but it died quickly as she saw the deadly seriousness on Desmond's face. Felicity took a step forward, separating herself from her husband's toxic orbit. She felt as if she were stepping out of a shadow and into the light for the first time in years. He's right, Lorenzo, she said, her voice now ringing with a strength no one in the room had ever heard from her. I don't plan garden parties. I own the garden, and the estate, and the company that caters the parties. She turned her attention to the stunned guests. My name is Felicity Davies Holston. My late father was Jonathan Davies, the founder of Northgate Holdings. A wave of audible gasps swept through the crowd. The Davies name was legend. It was a name associated with unimaginable, generationally entrenched wealth. It was a name that made Lorenzo Holston's flashy new money persona look like a child's sandcastle next to a mountain. Lorenzo's face went white. The blood drained from it, leaving a pasty, slack-jawed mask of disbelief. Davies, no. That's not possible. Your family was comfortable. My father valued privacy above all else, Felicity said, her gaze locking with his. A value you clearly have never understood. When we married, I chose to keep my background private. I funded your ambition anonymously through my family's holding company because I wanted a partner, not a parasite. I wanted to see what you would build if given the chance. And all you have built is this monument to your own ego on my family's foundation. Her words were precise, each one a hammer blow shattering the fragile glass of his reality. That's a lie, he sputtered, looking wildly around for support. She's lying. Tell them, Pierce. Desmond opened the leather folio he was carrying. I'm afraid every word she has spoken is the documented truth, he announced to the room. Holston Hospitality is and always has been a wholly owned subsidiary of Northgate Holdings. The sole owner and acting chairwoman of Northgate Holdings is Mrs. Felicity Davies Holston. Mr. Holston is not the owner. He is a salaried employee. Or rather, he paused, pulling out a single sheet of paper. He was. He took a step forward and held the paper out to Lorenzo. This is a letter of termination for your position as president of Holston Hospitality, effective immediately, citing Clause 17B of your employment contract regarding gross moral turpitude and actions bringing the company into disrepute. Lorenzo stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. He didn't take it. Beside him, Tiffany was hyperventilating. The color drained from her face as the implications crashed down on her. The money, the power, the access, it wasn't his. It was hers. The woman she had mocked and dismissed was the source of it all. Just then, a young woman in a courier's uniform, who had slipped in unnoticed behind Desmond's team, stepped forward. She approached Tiffany Blair. "Miss Tiffany Blair?" she asked timidly. Tiffany just stared, mute. "I have a delivery for you," the courier said, handing her a crisp envelope. With trembling fingers, Tiffany opened it. Inside was a multi-page invoice from a renowned Milanese fashion house for €157,000. Clipped to it was a small embossed card. Felicity watched as Tiffany read it. The note was simple. As of 10:05 p.m. this evening, the credit line of Mr. Lorenzo Holston has been permanently closed. We trust you will be able to make your own arrangements for payment. Northgate Holdings, accounts payable. The invoice fluttered from Tiffany's numb fingers and drifted to the floor. The show-stopping red dress suddenly looked like a clown costume, a garish symbol of a catastrophic miscalculation. The entire room was frozen in a state of suspended shock, witnessing a social and financial execution of breathtaking speed and precision. Lorenzo Holston, the titan of industry, had been exposed as a fraud, and his quiet, unassuming wife was revealed to be the true titan, a hidden empress who had just reclaimed her throne. The silence that followed the revelation was profound, broken only by the faint hysterical gasp from Tiffany. It was as if the air itself had been sucked out of the room. Lorenzo stood, frozen, his face a grotesque canvas of confusion, denial, and dawning horror. The universe as he knew it had just been turned inside out. "This is a joke," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He looked at Felicity, his eyes pleading for the first time in their marriage. "Lissy, what is this? Tell them it's a joke. Some kind of twisted prank." Felicity's expression was implacable. "The only joke, Lorenzo, was my belief that you were a man of substance. That was my mistake. And as of tonight, it is one I have rectified." Desmond Pierce, ever the professional, took charge of the narrative. "Mr. Holston," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent room, "your corporate accounts have been frozen. Your key cards for the office and all company properties have been deactivated. The vehicle leased to you by the company is to be returned by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Your personal effects from the office will be couriered to an address of your choosing." He gestured to one of the security men. "This is Frank. He will escort you from the premises now." Frank, a man built like a refrigerator, took a step towards Lorenzo. Reality finally hit Lorenzo like a physical blow. This wasn't a prank. This was real. This was the end. His carefully constructed world was not just cracking. It was being systematically demolished before his very eyes. A primal rage erupted from him. "You can't do this!" he roared, his voice cracking. He pointed a trembling finger at Felicity. "You bitch! After everything I did, I built this. This was all me." "You built nothing," Felicity replied, her voice dangerously quiet. "You were given a limitless budget, and you spent it. My father built a legacy of quiet, solid strength. You built a glittering facade to hide your own insecurities. This restaurant, this party, this entire brand is a reflection of you, Lorenzo, gaudy, loud, and fundamentally hollow." The public dressing down was brutal. The guests who had once clamored for his attention now stared at him with a mixture of pity and morbid fascination. He was no longer a king in his court. He was a court jester whose act had worn thin. "Security!" he shrieked again, his voice shrill with panic. "Get these people out of my restaurant," the head of the event's security detail. A man who had been taking orders from Lorenzo all night now looked hesitantly towards Desmond and Felicity. Desmond gave a slight shake of his head. The message was clear. There had been a change in management. Frank, the Northgate security man, placed a firm hand on Lorenzo's shoulder. "Sir, it's time to go." Lorenzo tried to shrug him off, his face contorted in a mask of fury. "Get your hands off me. Don't you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are, Mr. Halston," Desmond said coolly. "A former employee. Please do not make this more unpleasant than it needs to be." As Frank began to steer the sputtering, protesting Lorenzo towards the exit, all eyes turned to Tiffany. Her brief reign as the queen-in-waiting was over. She was now just a girl in a very expensive dress she couldn't afford, stranded in the wreckage of her ambition. She looked from the defeated Lorenzo to the powerful, composed Felicity. In a moment of sheer reptilian survival instinct, she made her choice. "I can't believe he lied to me," she cried out, tears of self-pity welling in her eyes. She looked at Felicity, her expression pleading. "He told me he was leaving you. He told me you two had an arrangement. I had no idea. I am as much a victim here as you are." The performance was so transparently false it was almost comical. Felicity regarded her with a look of utter disinterest, as if examining a mildly unpleasant insect. "Your arrangements with Mr. Halston are your own affair," Felicity said, her voice dismissive. "As is your invoice from Milan. Now I believe you are also leaving." The second Northgate security guard stepped towards Tiffany. She didn't need to be physically escorted. With a final desperate sob, she gathered the shreds of her dignity, turned and practically fled towards the exit. Her red sequined dress a retreating beacon of humiliation. The room watched as Lorenzo Halston, the man of the hour, was unceremoniously marched out of his own launch party. He was still shouting, still threatening lawsuits, still proclaiming his own genius. But his words were the hollow, meaningless echoes of a power that no longer existed. The doors swung shut behind him, leaving a stunned and silent party in his wake. For a long moment, nobody moved. The spectacle was over. Felicity Davies Halston stood alone in the center of the room, the undisputed, and until tonight, unknown center of power. She turned to face her guests, her expression composed. The awkwardness was palpable. What does one say after a public corporate execution? Felicity, however, was in full control. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice calm and assured, "please accept my sincerest apologies for that unpleasant piece of corporate housekeeping. It was a matter that regrettably required a public resolution." She gave a small, wry smile. "It seems Halston Hospitality is under new management, effective immediately. I would like to thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate the launch of the Aperture Club. The vision for this establishment was always one of elegance and excellence, and I intend to see that vision fully realized." She raised her glass of water. "Please enjoy the rest of your evening. The champagne is excellent, the food is superb, and the view, as always, is breathtaking. To new beginnings." The tension in the room broke. Someone started to clap, a tentative, hesitant sound. Then another joined, and another, until the entire room erupted in a wave of applause. It was a surreal moment. They were applauding not just her composure, but her power. They were witnessing the birth of a new icon in their world, a woman who had emerged from the shadows with the force of a hurricane. The jazz quartet, taking their cue, softly began to play again. Waiters resumed their rounds. The chatter started to build back up, now buzzing with the most sensational piece of gossip the city had seen in decades. Felicity had not just won. She had rewritten the entire game. And as she stood there, calmly surveying the room that was unequivocally hers, she felt not triumph, but a quiet, profound sense of peace. She was finally and completely free. The fallout from that night was not a wave, but a tsunami. By morning, every major news outlet and gossip blog had the story. The headlines were sensational. Hospitality king dethroned by secret heiress wife. The Halston hoax, Gregory Halston exposed as fraud. Billionaire bride's revenge. Felicity Davies reclaims her empire. The story was accompanied by blurry cell phone pictures from inside the party. Lorenzo's enraged face, Tiffany's tearful escape, and Felicity's regal, unshakable composure. For Lorenzo, the world ceased to exist. After being thrown out of the restaurant, he discovered his key to the penthouse no longer worked. The doorman at the Olympus, who had bowed to him for years, stopped him with a polite but firm, "I'm sorry, sir. You are no longer listed as a resident." His phone, a company device, was remotely wiped and deactivated an hour later. His credit cards, both corporate and the personal one, linked to his massive salary, were declined when he tried to check into a hotel. He was a ghost in the city he thought he owned. He ended up at the apartment of a sycophantic junior executive, a young man who was terrified but too intimidated to turn him away. From there, Lorenzo spent the next 48 hours in a spiraling vortex of rage and disbelief. He tried to call his lawyers, only to be reminded that his high-powered legal team was on retainer by Halston Hospitality, and now took their orders from Felicity. The independent lawyers he contacted quoted him retainers he couldn't possibly pay. He had no money. The accounts he thought were his were merely salary accounts, and the funds within had been frozen, pending a final audit for any misappropriated company expenses. He tried to call his friends, the developers and financiers, who had slapped him on the back just nights before. Most didn't answer. The few who did were curt and distant. In the world they inhabited, power was everything. Lorenzo no longer had any. He was radioactive. Tiffany Blair vanished. Her social media was deleted, her phone number disconnected. The last anyone heard, she was desperately trying to sell the designer clothes and jewelry Lorenzo had bought her, to pay the massive bill for the red dress and to buy a plane ticket back to whatever small town she had crawled out of. Her 15 minutes of fame had ended in a lifetime of debt and infamy. While Lorenzo's world imploded, Felicity's was solidifying. She spent the day after the party in the main boardroom of Halston Hospitality, a room Lorenzo had decorated with oversized portraits of himself. The first thing she did was order them taken down. With Desmond Pierce by her side, she met with the stunned but professional executive team. There was no gloating, no drama, just crisp, efficient, and intelligent command. She laid out her vision for the company's future, a move away from Lorenzo's flashy trend-chasing projects, and a return to the core Davies family values of timeless luxury, impeccable service, and shrewd, sustainable investment. "The name will be changing," she announced to the board. "Halston Hospitality is a brand built on a fiction. We will be rebranding as the Davies Collection. Our reputation will be built not on the personality of one man, but on the quality of our service and the integrity of our name." The team, who had long grown tired of Lorenzo's tyrannical ego and erratic management style, were visibly relieved. They saw in Felicity a leader of quiet confidence and formidable intelligence. The ship had been steadied, and its new captain clearly knew how to navigate. A week later, Lorenzo was served with divorce papers. They were delivered to him at a cheap coffee shop where he was trying to use the public Wi-Fi. The terms were brutal and non-negotiable. According to the prenuptial agreement he had arrogantly signed without reading, closely believing his own future earnings would dwarf her family money, he was entitled to nothing. The agreement had an infidelity clause that was now easily provable, negating any potential for spousal support. He would leave the marriage with only the personal possessions he had brought into it. He was left with less than nothing. He was left with a reputation so thoroughly destroyed that no one in the industry would touch him. The most cutting part of the legal documents was a small annexed note. It was a bill from Northgate Holdings for $2.3 million, the audited cost of personal extravagances he had charged to the company over 5 years. Lavish trips with Tiffany custom suits, gambling debts, and gifts for associates. The note stated that the company was willing to forego prosecution for corporate fraud if he signed the divorce papers without contest and agreed to a permanent non-disclosure agreement. It was a checkmate. He was cornered, penniless and powerless. He signed. The final crushing humiliation came a month after the gala. Lorenzo, now living in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of the city, saw an article in Apex Business Quarterly. The cover, which had once featured his own smiling face, now showed Felicity. She stood not in a flashy restaurant, but in front of a blueprint, her expression focused and powerful. The headline read, "The Matriarch Takes the Helm. Felicity Davies and the Rebirth of an Empire." The article detailed the true history of Northgate Holdings and lauded her bold, decisive actions in restructuring the company. It painted Lorenzo as a footnote, a temporary and deeply flawed manager who had been swiftly removed. He wasn't even a villain in the story. He was an error that had been corrected. He had been rendered irrelevant. He threw the magazine across the room, the sound of its pages hitting the wall a pathetic thud in the silence of his new life. He had flown so close to the sun, convinced he was a god of fire, only to find out the sun was never his. He was just a moth drawn to a flame that was never meant for him, and he had been burned to ash. The silence in his tiny apartment was different from the silence in the penthouse. That one had been full of unspoken tension. This one was simply empty. It was the sound of his own personal abyss. 6 months passed. The city, with its short memory for yesterday's scandals, moved on. The name Lorenzo Holston was now only ever spoken as a cautionary tale at cocktail parties. The Davies collection, however, was a name synonymous with a new era of quiet, confident luxury. Felicity had proven to be a natural leader, possessing her father's shrewd business acumen, combined with a modern, more empathetic approach. She had not just saved the company. She was making it better, more profitable, and more respected than ever before. She sold off the gaudier assets Lorenzo had acquired and reinvested in properties that reflected her vision of lasting elegance. The Aperture Club was renamed the Northgate. She had the bronze and marble interior softened with classic wood and rich fabrics. The ostentatious "look at me" atmosphere was replaced with one of understated sophistication. It became the most sought-after reservation in the city, not for the scene, but for the impeccable food and flawless service. One crisp autumn afternoon, Felicity stood on a construction site, a hard hat on her head. It was the future site of the flagship hotel for the Davies collection. She was reviewing architectural plans with her project manager. "The steel supplier confirmed the delivery for next Tuesday, Ms. Davies," the manager said, pointing to a section of the blueprint. "The first foundational beams will be in place by the end of the month." "Excellent," Felicity said, her eyes scanning the complex drawings with an expert's ease. "Ensure the quality control is rigorous. I want every rivet, every weld inspected twice." As she spoke, she caught a glimpse of movement on the street corner opposite the site. A man stood there, thin and poorly dressed, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He was staring at her, his face a mixture of resentment and awe. It was Lorenzo. He looked like a ghost. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting coat. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by the shuffling gait of a broken man. He had apparently found some menial, low-level job, but the fire in him was extinguished. He had likely come to see what she was building to witness the empire he thought was his thriving without him. For a moment their eyes met across the bustling street. There was no anger left in Felicity, no desire for revenge. There was only a quiet, sad finality. He was a chapter of her life that was now closed, a lesson learned. She gave him a slow, deliberate nod. It was not a greeting of friendship or a gesture of pity. It was an acknowledgement, a final dismissal. Then she turned her back on him, returning her attention to the plans for her building. She picked up a marker and made a small, decisive change to the blueprint, circling a structural element. "Let's reinforce this section here," she said to her manager. "I want the foundation to be unshakable." She initialed the change with her signature, KD. It was the same signature that had signed the documents creating the company, the same one that had signed the termination papers, and the same one that now authorized the placement of the first steel beam of a true and lasting legacy. Her legacy, built not on lies or borrowed glory, but on her own strength, her own name, and a foundation of solid steel. Lorenzo Halston was a memory on the pavement. Felicity Davies was the architect of the skyline. In the end, it wasn't about the money or the revenge. It was about the reclamation of a name and the rediscovery of a strength that had been silent for far too long. Felicity Davies Halston taught us that true power isn't loud and arrogant. It's quiet, patient, and waits for the perfect moment to reveal itself. Lorenzo Halston built his world on sand and was shocked when the tide of truth inevitably washed it all away. It's a powerful reminder that you can never truly own something that you haven't earned with integrity. Have you ever seen someone so spectacularly get what they deserve? What did you think of Felicity's final decisive move? Let us know in the comments below. If you loved this story of long-awaited justice and empowerment, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing it with someone who needs a story of quiet strength, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more dramatic tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a single moment of the drama. Thank you for listening.